Imagine walking into a grocery store on a normal day and watching a moment so heartbreaking, it changes your life forever. That's exactly what happened to David Turner, a quiet millionaire who preferred to keep to himself. He wasn't the type to show off his wealth, but that day, he witnessed something that pulled him into the life of a stranger in a way he never expected. What he saw at that store checkout would shake his heart, test his empathy, and ultimately remind us all of what it means to be human. Stay until the end, because what David did next would inspire an entire town. David had always been a man who observed more than he spoke. On this chilly afternoon, he stopped by a small neighborhood grocery store while heading back from a business meeting. He grabbed a few items, nothing much, just some coffee and bread, but while standing in line at the checkout, his attention was drawn to the woman in front of him. She looked exhausted, her hair loosely tied back, her clothes worn and faded, and by her side was a baby in an old stroller, softly fussing with hunger. The mother tried to soothe her child as she placed a small carton of baby formula on the conveyor belt along with a few other essentials, bread, eggs, and rice. When the cashier announced the total, David saw the woman's expression freeze. She fumbled in her purse, counted coins, and realized she didn't have enough. For a moment, she stood frozen, her eyes darting between the baby and the milk. Then, with trembling hands, she pushed the baby formula aside and whispered, "Take this off, please." The cashier nodded without much emotion, but David felt a sharp pang in his chest. The mother paid for the rest, her shoulders drooping in defeat as the baby whimpered. Something about that moment pierced through David's heart. He could have easily stepped forward, handed over his card, and covered her bill. But instead, curiosity and compassion made him follow. He wanted to understand her story, not just rescue her in the moment. After paying for his own groceries, he stepped outside and noticed her walking briskly down the street, the stroller wheels rattling against the uneven sidewalk. David followed at a respectful distance. The woman stopped outside a small, run-down apartment building and struggled to carry the stroller up the cracked steps. He hesitated but then approached, his voice gentle. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice back at the store. You left behind the milk. Is everything okay?" The woman stiffened, pulling the stroller closer. "We're fine," she said quickly, her tone defensive. Her eyes held both pride and fear, the look of someone who had been judged too many times before. David didn't push. Instead, he simply introduced himself. "My name's David. I just couldn't walk away without asking if there's anything I can do." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, she whispered, "I'm Sarah. And no, there's nothing anyone can do. It's just hard right now." Her voice cracked, but she blinked back tears, unwilling to break in front of a stranger. David noticed the peeling paint of the building, the flickering light by the doorway, and the way Sarah clutched the stroller like it was her last shield against the world. He knew there was more to her story. Carefully, he asked, "If you don't mind me asking, what happened?" At first, Sarah resisted. But something in David's sincerity softened her walls. She explained how she had lost her job months ago when her employer downsized. Her husband had walked out shortly after, unable to handle the pressure of poverty. Since then, Sarah had been doing odd cleaning jobs, barely scraping together enough to pay rent. The formula she left behind wasn't the first time she had sacrificed, it was just the one moment David happened to witness. David listened quietly, his heart heavy. He thought about his own life, his mansion, his wealth, his comfortable routines. And here was a mother, strong yet broken, doing everything she could just to keep her child alive. The next words left his mouth before he even planned them. "Sarah, I don't want to overstep. But let me help you. Not as charity, but as a friend. Please let me buy the formula. No child should go hungry." Sarah's eyes welled up, and for the first time, she let a tear slip down her cheek. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you." But David didn't stop at buying milk. Over the next few days, he returned, not just with groceries, but with genuine care. He connected Sarah with a friend who ran a small business, offering her steady work. He arranged for her apartment repairs, quietly covering the costs without ever making her feel small. Most importantly, he spent time with her and her baby, reminding Sarah that she wasn't alone. Word of David's quiet generosity spread through the neighborhood. But he never sought recognition. He often said, "I didn't save her. She saved me from forgetting what really matters. Months later, Sarah stood in that same grocery store, this time with her head held high. She placed baby formula on the counter without hesitation, her paycheck folded neatly in her wallet. And behind her, David smiled, proud not of his wealth, but of the courage and strength Sarah had found within herself. The story of David and Sarah became more than just a moment at a checkout line, it became a lesson that echoed through every person who heard it. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest act of noticing someone's struggle can spark the biggest change, because at the end of the day, what we give isn't nearly as powerful as how we make others feel seen, heard, and valued, and that is why the millionaire who once watched a struggling mom put back baby milk chose to follow her, not to judge her, but to walk beside her until she could rise again.